Welcome to Darkened Dreams, your haven for spine-chilling tales that blur the line between reality and nightmare. Before we dive into tonight's stories, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. If you enjoy these terrifying tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest stories. It was November 3rd, 2023, and the rain had been pouring since morning. My parents had left for a weekend trip to celebrate their anniversary, leaving me, Lily, alone at home. They had tried to convince me to come along, but at 19, I cherished my independence and had declined. I had plans to binge-watch my favorite horror movies, ironically, and enjoy some peace and quiet. By 6:30 p.m., I was cozied up on the couch, a bowl of popcorn in my lap, and the first movie of the evening queued up. The sound of the rain pattering against the windows was oddly soothing, creating the perfect backdrop for a night of horror films. The wind howled occasionally, but it was just weather. Nothing to be scared of, right? Just as the movie reached its first jump scare, the lights flickered. I glanced around, a bit uneasy, but when the power stabilized, I shrugged it off. The storm was probably affecting the power lines. I settled back into the couch, trying to focus on the movie. I was deep into the movie when a knock at the door startled me. I paused the film and listened. Who could it be in this weather? I wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitant, I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. A man stood on the porch, drenched from head to toe. He looked harmless enough, but I wasn't about to open the door for a stranger. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Car broke down. Can I use your phone?" he replied, his voice muffled by the rain. I was feeling uneasy. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you in. There's a gas station a mile down the road." "They should have a phone," I said. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just stood there, looking around as if assessing the house. "All right, thanks," he finally said and walked off the porch, disappearing into the rain. I tried to shake off the encounter and resumed my movie. But then, I heard a noise, something scraping against the side of the house. I paused the film again and listened intently. It sounded like branches, but when I peeked out the window, there were no trees close enough to scratch the house. The noise stopped, but my unease didn't. By 8:30 p.m., the power went out completely. I cursed under my breath, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight. The storm was in full swing now, with thunder rumbling in the distance. I lit some candles, trying to create a bit of light in the now dark and ominous house. I heard another noise, this time coming from the back door. My heart pounded as I crept towards the kitchen, phone in hand. The back door was slightly ajar, swinging gently in the wind. I knew I had locked it. My stomach dropped. Someone had been in the house. I was in full panic mode. I locked myself in my bedroom, trying to call my parents, but there was no signal. I could hear faint movements downstairs, footsteps, a chair being dragged, the unmistakable sound of someone trying to be quiet but not quite succeeding. At 10:00 p.m. I decided I had to make a run for it. I couldn't stay locked in my room forever. I grabbed my keys, phone, and a flashlight. I slowly opened my bedroom door, listening for any sound. The house was eerily silent, except for the relentless rain. I had made it to the top of the stairs when I saw him, the man from earlier, standing in the living room, drenched and muddy. He turned, and our eyes locked. "You shouldn't have locked the door," he said, his voice cold and menacing. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the flashlight at him and bolted down the stairs. He stumbled, and I used the moment to sprint past him and out the front door. The rain was a torrent, but I didn't care. I ran to my car, praying it would start. The car roared to life, and I sped down the driveway, not daring to look back. I drove straight to the police station, drenched and shaking. They took my report and sent officers to the house, but when they arrived, the man was gone. The police found signs of forced entry and muddy footprints, but no trace of the man. They assured me they would patrol the area, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My parents cut their trip short and came home, horrified by what had happened. My neighbor came over the next day and I told him everything. "That's terrifying," he said, his face pale. I always knew this place felt a bit too isolated. We installed security cameras and extra locks, but the memory of that night never faded. The storm, the man, the fear, it all lingers in my mind, a constant reminder of how vulnerable we can be. The house feels different now. What was once my safe haven is now a place of unease. Every creak, every shadow, every stormy night brings back the terror of that encounter. I don't know who he was or why he chose my house, but I'll never forget the night the rain never stopped. It was December 14, 2019, a chilly winter evening. My parents had left for a company holiday party, and my sister, Mia, was at a friend's house for a sleepover. I, Alex, was home alone, eager to enjoy a quiet night of video games and junk food. The snow outside was falling gently, creating a serene, peaceful atmosphere. I was settled in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, with a pizza on the way. The snow continued to fall, and the house was warm and cozy. I turned on my favorite game, ready for an evening of uninterrupted play. At 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. I paused the game and went to the door, expecting the pizza delivery. A man in his mid-30s stood there, holding a pizza box. He had a friendly smile, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at me. "Here's your pizza," he said, handing it over. I thanked him, paid, and closed the door quickly, feeling a strange chill despite the warmth inside. I was back in the living room, devouring the pizza and playing my game, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. I kept glancing at the window, expecting to see someone there. The snow was now falling more heavily, and the street outside was completely deserted. I saw it, a shadow moving outside the living room window. My heart skipped a beat. I paused the game and stared, but the shadow was gone. It must have been my imagination, I told myself, but I couldn't shake off the unease. At 8 p.m. the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting my parents or Mia, but there was only silence on the other end. "Hello," I said, but no one answered. The call disconnected. I felt a growing sense of dread. There was a knock at the door. I cautiously approached and looked through the peephole. No one was there. I opened the door slightly and looked around, but the porch was empty. The snow had covered any tracks that might have been there. I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. I ran to see what had happened and found the kitchen window shattered. Snow and cold air were blowing in. I grabbed a knife from the drawer, my heart racing. Someone was out there and they had broken the window to get in. By 9:30 p.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. I was paralyzed with fear. I knew I had to get out, but my legs felt like lead. I took a deep breath and slowly made my way to the front door, knife in hand. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I burst out the front door and ran through the snow, not looking back. I headed straight for the neighbor's house, slipping and stumbling in the snow. I pounded on their door, desperate for help. They let me in, their faces filled with concern. I was inside the neighbor's house, explaining everything that had happened. They were kind and offered me a place to stay for the night. We sat in their living room sipping hot cocoa while they kept a watchful eye on the window. As we sat in the neighbor's living room, there was a sudden knock on their door. We all froze. The neighbor, Mr. Harris, slowly approached the door and looked through the peephole. He turned to me, his face pale, and whispered, "It's the pizza guy." Mr. Harris opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" he asked. The pizza guy smiled, but it was a smile that sent chills down my spine. "I'm just checking on your neighbor. They seemed a bit scared earlier," he said. Mr. Harris shut the door quickly and locked it. At midnight, we decided to call it a night. I was given a spare room, but sleep was impossible. I lay there staring at the ceiling, every noise making my heart race. I couldn't stop thinking about the pizza guy and the broken window. The next morning, I returned home with Mr. Harris. The house felt different, ominous. We checked every room, but there was no sign of anyone. The broken window was the only evidence of the previous night's terror. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the fear. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every noise. Aaron, our other neighbor, checked in on us often. "It's terrifying to think someone was watching you," he said, his face grim. We all tried to move on, but the memory of that night lingered. Our home, once a place of safety and comfort, now felt like a fortress under siege. Every shadow, every sound, every winter night brought back the fear. We may never know who was out there or why they chose our house, but the terror of that night will stay with us forever. It was a dreary, rainy evening on February 14th, 2024. My name is Mark. My wife, Hannah, had taken our 2 kids, Emily and Jack, to visit her parents for the weekend. I had decided to stay home to catch up on some work and enjoy a rare, quiet night. By 5 p.m, the house was already feeling unusually empty without the usual chaos and noise. The rain was coming down hard, tapping against the windows with a rhythmic persistence. I settled into my home office, ready to tackle a few pending reports. At 6:30 p.m, I heard a noise that pulled me away from my work. It sounded like a soft knock, but I dismissed it, thinking it was just the rain. I continued working, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I decided to investigate. I walked through the house, checking the doors and windows. Everything seemed normal, but the feeling of being watched was growing stronger. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to my imagination. I made myself a quick dinner and sat down in the living room to eat. The rain had intensified, creating a relentless drumming sound on the roof. As I took a bite of my sandwich, I noticed the back door slightly ajar. My heart skipped a beat. I was sure I had locked it. I approached the door cautiously, closing and locking it. As I turned around, I thought I saw a shadow move across the kitchen. I froze, my pulse racing, but when I flicked the light on, the room was empty. I was back in the living room trying to focus on a movie, but the sense of unease was growing. I decided to call Hannah to check in. She picked up on the second ring, and her voice immediately put me at ease. We chatted for a few minutes, and I didn't mention the strange occurrences, not wanting to worry her. At 8:30 p.m, I heard it again, a distinct, deliberate knock, this time from the front door. I walked over, my nerves on edge. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. I hesitated before opening the door slightly, peering out into the rainy night. No one was there. I shut the door and locked it, feeling more unsettled. I checked the security system, making sure it was armed. I even went through the house again, double-checking all the locks. I decided to call it a night. I locked the bedroom door behind me, feeling somewhat safer. I tried to relax with a book, but my mind kept drifting back to the strange knocks and the open door. Just as I was starting to drift off, I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming from the attic. I listened, hoping it was just my imagination, but the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate. Gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and headed towards the attic ladder. I hesitated at the bottom, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly climbed up, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. By 9:45 p.m, I was in the attic, the beam of my flashlight revealing old boxes and forgotten items. The footsteps had stopped, leaving an eerie silence. As I turned to leave, the light caught something, a small, old-fashioned doll sitting in the corner that I had never seen before. My breath caught in my throat. I quickly descended the ladder, locking the attic door behind me. I retreated to the bedroom, my mind racing. Who put the doll there? How did it get in the attic? I called Hannah again, trying to sound calm. She could sense something was wrong, but I reassured her it was nothing. After hanging up, I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair, feeling a little safer. Just as I was about to lie down, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands trembling. I heard the footsteps again, this time coming down the hallway. I was hiding in the closet, trying to steady my breathing. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. I heard the doorknob jiggle, followed by a soft, sinister chuckle. Suddenly, The chair barricading the door was pushed aside, and the door creaked open. I held my breath, peeking through the slats of the closet door. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway. The figure moved slowly into the room, looking around. I could barely make out their face, but the cold, calculating look in their eyes was unmistakable. They searched the room methodically, as if they knew I was there. The figure moved closer to the closet. I gripped the flashlight tightly, ready to defend myself. Just as they reached for the closet door, the power came back on, startling them. They turned and fled, disappearing down the hallway. I waited a few moments before emerging, my legs shaky. I checked the house again, but the intruder was gone. I called the security company, who sent someone to inspect the system. The rest of the night was a blur of fear and sleeplessness. The security company found no signs of forced entry, leaving me with more questions than answers. The next morning, Hannah and the kids returned. I told her everything, and we decided to stay at a hotel for a few days while we upgraded our security system. The experience left me shaken, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every noise. I never found out who the intruder was or what they wanted, but the fear of that night stayed with me. Every time it rains, I can't help but remember the unseen visitor who turned a quiet evening into a nightmare. The sense of safety in my own home was shattered, replaced by a lingering dread that refuses to fade.